On this video, I wanted to take a step back from all of the technical aspects of the Blackmagic line of cameras, and I really wanted to focus on the story, on how Blackmagic came about and how I believe it's now changing videography forever. So what I wanted to communicate in this video was how the Blackmagic line of cameras and basically all the products have helped me and how I've seen them help other people. I wanted to give a bit of my story because people following along, whichever step in the program, whichever stage in their career they're at, they can probably resonate with a lot of the things that I went through. And so just to kind of sum it up briefly, where I started was working with a company. I was basically handling all the videography. And so I had to come up with everything. They did, online videos to basically teach people about business. And so I handled all their videography, basically did their whole setup. And so at one point in time, I had to figure out what kind of cameras they were going to use. And so it was interesting because they had two different kinds already. They had a Canon T2i, and they had just like an old school kind of Steadicam. And so the sort of standardized broadcast camera, that's the one they like to use for everything because that was the standard. That's what they thought was, the best that you could do at that time. And I like to use the Canon T2i. And, it was kind of strange because they had, the big professional camera. That was the main camera. And I like to use the T2i just because it was, simpler. I thought it looked nicer, and I didn't know exactly why. I wasn't like too educated on the technical concepts yet. Over time, I began to learn why I preferred the camera over the other camera, and what I was beginning to look for, what kind of specifications I was beginning to look for in a camera. And so I think that's one of the biggest things Blackmagic allowed people to do was they bridged the gap between basically like casual videographers and serious videographers. They bridged the gap between that because I wasn't able to look at like Reds and RE cameras like for this company that I was working for. That was like so not in their budget. So that was just point blank. It just wasn't in their budget. They couldn't do it. I had to find other solutions. And instead of just going with the status quo and picking a standardized thing, I wanted to just find whatever was the best. I wanted to find whatever I could just to make their picture look as nice as possible. In that, I found a new line of cameras, like at least it was new to me. It was probably like 3 or 4 years ago. And that was the Blackmagic line of cameras. It had, these amazing specifications, and the price wasn't out of our range. I think that's like the second big point is that one of the biggest reasons this camera was so disruptive, these lines of cameras, was because the price point was so aggressive. And I've told people about this. I've talked to other people about this who are just looking at different cameras, who are videographers themselves. And it's so amazing to look back and reflect on what Blackmagic was able to do at that time and how disruptive that move was to offer that kind of camera at that price point. And, they were tired of other camera manufacturers just totally jacking up the price and not offering what they could to the audience that needed it the most. When they decided to come out with their own camera, it was just like a big FU to all the other camera manufacturers. And, we've seen over time we've seen over time how the cameras have progressed, because some of the camera bodies, it was a work in progress, because like they came out with some bodies that were like, why would you even do that? And they came out with certain functions that were really, or that people really wanted, certain things that, like they offered a 1/4-inch input and no XLR input, just little things like that they improved over time. It was amazing because they didn't have everything figured out, but they just knew that there was an audience there and they had to bridge that gap. And I think it was so amazing because that audience is still continuing to grow, but it's become such an insane solution for more and more people as they're finding it out. Of course, like, cameras like the camera lines like Canon and Nikon, they have such a foothold in the industry, with their marketing and promotion, everything like that. But the more people find out about Blackmagic, the more accessible this kind of solution is for their business. I wanted to go a little bit into how exactly it impacted my business, because for people who are doing like freelance or they're starting an agency, they can sort of look at this and translate it to what they're doing. With the company I worked for, I eventually, went on my own. It was my brother and I, we started our own business called LMB Productions, and we did web design, videography, photography, and branding. And so, of course, in all that is videography. And basically, our business, just it being us two, we had to find technological solutions that would work for us so we could help other people. The Blackmagic line of cameras was one of the most amazing solutions because, in my previous job, I had learned what it could do. And I knew, like, on my own, I could build around that. And it's amazing because, like, what I communicate to the clients I work with is basically like this level of videography at the price that we're able to offer it has never been possible before. It's never even been close to possible, and it's happened in like the last 5-10 years. I know businesses that would try to get a commercial done, and it was maybe 20-25 years ago, somebody would try and get a commercial done, and your only solution was to go through some sort of a production company. I mean, like a full-fledged production company. That's all they do. They have the like professional lights. They have the professional cameras, high-end, everything, and they're totally built out for that. And so that was the main option. And obviously, that's going to be an investment for that business. That's going to be a fairly large investment for that business. And so, like, fast forwarded a little later, videographers would have to, if like at this point in time, freelance videographers, they would pretty much have to rent out everything. I mean, it was rare that somebody would have all their, all their own studio equipment, or at least it wouldn't be on nearly as high of a level as, huge production companies. Now, people can basically have all their production in-house. Companies like myself, like we're a really small team, but we have everything we need to make a full-scale production. And I'm not trying to like brag on where we're at on production level or anything, because there are people way better than me, people who are using the camera way better than me. I'm just saying, like, as a whole, videographers now can do absolutely amazing things, incredible things, like the highest level of work all themselves. You know, like with the, I think the main thing is when the camera problem is solved, which I believe Blackmagic designed for this niche. When the camera problem is solved, it makes it so much easier to build around it. You can, you can focus on the lights, you can focus on the audio, and find all the other solutions you need in order to make a production when the camera problem is solved. And most of all, you can focus on the story, on what you're shooting. And so that's that. I think that is the key. That's really what Blackmagic design allowed videographers to do. And because you can see videos like all over the internet of people who have made amazing videos with this camera, and amazing looking. And of course, it's getting more. It's being used more in film. It's not like huge in film or anything yet, but for the people who are either freelancing or in like a small agency, these cameras have been just totally game changing, and I just see it accelerating the growth of videography and the growth of like online video storytelling. And so just like the last thing I wanted to talk about, the last thing I just wanted to mention was how impactful DaVinci Resolve is. Never before DaVinci Resolve has there been a program that gives so much while being free. I don't think that's an exaggeration, because it would be hard to find a program that lets you do so much, that has so much intelligence built into it, that's completely free. I don't know of any other program ever that's so built out and that's completely free. Of course, they have a paid version, but the free version is just has so much, because I learned on Final Cut Pro 7, and I knew there was there was Premiere Pro, and I worked on it like a very little bit. The computer I worked on at the time, there was no way it was handling Premiere Pro. It would render for hours. And so at school, I think it was like in middle or high school, I was able to work on Final Cut Pro 7. And Final Cut Pro 7 for me was pretty game changing. I mean, even then I recognized that you could do all your editing on here. There's no need to how back in the day people would have to, send it off to lab, get it colored, get it back, chop it up, and edit it like that. All that was done digitally and in Final Cut Pro 7, and it actually looked pretty damn good. I thought that was pretty game changing at the time, but then to where DaVinci Resolve took that for free was amazing, because like Final Cut Pro 7, it was a pretty great program, but it still cost a fair amount. It didn't cost a lot, but it cost a fair amount. But DaVinci Resolve has all that, and I think plenty more. And it's free today. It's free, and so that's amazing. I was explaining to one of my clients, who came from sort of the old school way of doing things, who came from shooting commercials with a production company, that type of deal. When I say commercial, that's sort of what they think. And I was explaining now how pretty much everything can be done with one person, and it can be done so quickly. I had an experience that I basically shot a commercial in a weekend, and It was not the most glamorous commercial. So it wasn't like a super high in production. It was just basically a little something that they could do to promote for their Christmas special. And they needed it really, really fast. That was the main thing, was they needed it done super, super quickly. And again, I'm not doing this, I'm not saying this to brag, but when I got everything shot, I got it shot on Friday and I turned it around on Monday, and it was all me. I did like all the lighting, all the audio, did the video. The shoot probably took 4 hours, and I edited it all in DaVinci, and I sent it off to basically the commercial company, the distribution company, on Monday. And the media company that distributes the commercial, they said it was the best commercial they'd ever seen. And of course, this is like on a local level, but it's like, I know it was because of, in conjunction with all the things I know about videography, it's in conjunction with the solutions that have been offered now. It's because of the technology that's available now. That's what's so amazing, because like I know there are people in my shoes. I know there are people who have done the same thing, that have done like the 48-hour challenge. That's getting bigger and bigger now, and it's getting to a ridiculous level. It's getting to where it's like, these are amazing films that are done completely in 48 hours, and that's amazing. That's like that is what technology has given us, and I think Blackmagic design has been a huge part of that. I just wanted to communicate this to some people who are either looking at Blackmagic design as a solution, or are just looking for different ways to communicate to their client how what they do is so valuable. Like just why we're able to compete with the big guys. And it's because of these technological solutions that the gap has been bridged, and individuals and small companies are able to compete with the larger production companies out there, and sometimes even offer way more aggressive and way more comprehensive solutions for other businesses.